One thing I noticed with both of y'all is you're both using the word "we" when talking about the companies that you're working with. And, you know,
when the deal doesn't go well, we say they. But it's...
is that, it's actually kind of an interesting point. I mean, is that gelling moment, when does that take place? Is it typically before or after the deal's signed?
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, I mentioned in our, you know, in my presentation that the fit is like the most important thing. It's the number one thing, especially at earlier stage. I mean, no at the later stage. Right. So, you know, you just have a common ground, you know, when you do these deals. And I think for us as, you know, as minority partners, we're along for the ride in many respects and just really there to be supportive and help provide resources. So that's we, you know, that's we as we think about it. So, you know, you only do a number of these, and they're you know, they're your partners, and that's the we.
And I really liked Larry's presentation. He talked a lot about kind of operational involvement, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, kind of being in the trenches with the teams, and you know, we share that point of view. So when I say we, I don't want to be taking credit for the incredible work that the team and our teams do every day, but you know, it's more than just writing a check and kind of waiting for the quarterly board meetings to happen. I think we're both investors that are relatively involved, fairly hands-on in the day-to-day work of our businesses, recognizing that operators are operators and we're investors, but we obviously want to be there with them.
It's costing more to get to we these days, right?
Yes.
So what's that like, knowing that there are so many suitors for so many of these companies that we have here?
You know, it's just the reality of the world that we live in today. So it's, you know, for us, it's just recognizing that, you know, we want to get our story out. We want to talk about why we're a great partner. There's a lot of great options out there. I mean, this room is full of them, and we just want to be differentiating ourselves on sort of our values, our track record, our personalities, chemistry. I mean, there's a lot of the intangibles that come into play, and you know, if we didn't believe that, you know, that we could continue to be successful in the space, we wouldn't be here. And so, frankly, it's not changing our behavior as much as it is just encouraging us to it's a great reminder just to get out and really talk about sort of, well, who's Encore? We can't assume, we can't take for granted that people know who we are and what we do. So we just need to get out and communicate more and communicate better.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, from our side, I think, you know, we're not, you know, for the most part, about 80% of what we do is personal, you know, direct, you know, straight direct contact with companies, not through a banking process. So it's even more important for us. I mean, I think we got to have the fundamental, you know, we have to check those boxes on fundamentals to feel like even, you know, as the marketplace shifts to, you know, a hot marketplace, that we feel good with that. But, you know, for us, it's a one-on-one conversation and really looking at the long-term view, because there's going to be a number of financing rounds after us. I think we position our partners and not just thinking about today, but thinking about that next round as well. Because that's the biggest, you know, that's the biggest danger. Right. Sometimes is, you know, yeah, maybe you can sometimes get that capital at a certain price. Yep. And, you know, it's important for entrepreneurs to you know, curb dilution, and I get that, but you can also think about that next round and how you're going to make that next, you know, the next plateau. And I think we talk about that a lot with our partners and kind of set that expectation.
I do think the sector focus also really helps. You know, all of us, we're committed to this space. I was on we have a weekly deal review call, and this morning we were just chatting about one opportunity not too far from here that we just noticed the date on the deal log. We've known the company for 11 years. And we've been talking for 11 years. It's the longest dating process that we have on our deal log right now, but, you know, hopefully it becomes something. And if it doesn't, that's fine, because hopefully we've learned something along the way, and hopefully they've gotten something out of it. But it takes time and patience, and we're in a cycle right now where it's just going to require more time and more patience, and probably some more dollars.
Are you seeing changes in the round structure as more capital flows into the category, and how's that affecting the deal-making process?
For the earlier stage, I mean, we're typically seeing convertible preferred structures out there. Sometimes you see some bells and whistles. So I think it's more, a play on valuation. Sometimes you can add some structure to that to kind of balance that higher valuation in a hot time frame. But we kind of try to keep it vanilla, honestly, for where we are, because I think it's just, as you get to the larger rounds, there's more room. We want to keep it clean for Bill's group when he comes in and hopefully takes that next plateau.
And I think that's an important point. Is the more complicated sort of chart of investors gets, the harder it is to bring in that next stage, and the more work you're putting on both in your hands as a CFO and in the company in the next round's hands. There's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of competition.
I think we're seeing a lot more of that kind of dynamic in some of the, call it, relatively earlier stage opportunities, or I should say with younger companies, and that a lot more capital has gone in than when we were seeing the same size companies just a few years ago, through multiple series of investment. Each round has had obviously different valuation, but a lot of different structure. It does make trying to get a private equity deal done a bit more challenging. So it's something that I think has come up quite a bit, is also just a lot of these companies that maybe have been, call it, overcapitalized at a very early stage. That's a challenge.
As the interest in the space increases, though, are you taking a look at companies that have been around, maybe those companies that were once thought a little bit overcapitalized, and saying, you know what, maybe it's actually time to try and reconsider this company? I mean, should folks who maybe haven't been as successful in the past at fundraising because there wasn't enough interest in the sector, maybe think about diving back into the capital pool?
Well, I think, and that seems to be true amongst some of the friends I've been chatting with today. We're leaving no stone unturned right now, and just given the overall competitiveness in the category, or in sort of in our world among institutional investors, there's a lot more capital out there. There's more players, and so yes, I mean, I think the short answer is we're looking at giving every deal opportunity that extra look and extra consideration.
Maybe some frogs are evolving.
Sure. I mean, I think we often see companies and too early, maybe too early, that don't have the proof of concept that we want, and they evolve. So I think there's always, I mean, these conversations are ongoing, like you mentioned, and and it's something. There's always a right. I mean, it's it's the fit, it's the timing. Those things all have to come together to get a deal done. So sometimes the timing's not right. It can be right at another point.
Now, I know we talked about this. I wonder if you guys have questions for each other on these deals that were done.
Well,
Come up with something.
now I feel like we're getting personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, and again, I really liked, Larry, how you laid out kind of where you're focused and how you kind of screen opportunities, and what I didn't fully appreciate was you really believe this is kind of your involvement is that step before us. It seems like a lot of these companies, just given growth trajectory, might leapfrog private equity entirely. So, I want to hear from you. You're committed to bringing in, the Encores of the world. But no, I'd love to hear how you're thinking about, maybe that is kind of the last little injection that the business needs before, the big CPGs or before they get involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, for us, and coming from our own company that we are involved in, we ended up, going the private equity route and then selling to a strategic later. I think we look at these businesses and try to do what's best for the business, and we try to take that approach in what we do. And that if that's an early situation where a larger group can add more value, then that's the right thing. If it's obviously we've seen in food in particular that strategics are coming in earlier and earlier. which creates another dynamic entirely, sometimes putting a lot of pressure on valuation because they can taste it a little bit early, and that's okay too. I mean, that's a good thing in some respects for the market, but I think we want to do what's best for the business. So whatever we can guide, if we think the resources and the company thinks the resources of what you bring are the right thing, that's great too. So I think we're committed to that, and I think if you do that, then you're going to have the right outcome. I think you really will. So
I think that's right. And I think it raises the question. It seems like there's more. Well, Jeff, you talked about some of the changes that we've seen in structure. I think what I've seen over the last handful of years, more than anything else, change in our world of investing in food companies is partnerships, collaborations, club deals, but also partnering with the 301s of the world, partnering with corporate strategics, partnering with these kind of pseudo-strategic type vehicles. It's that to me is kind of much more interesting. Even retailers starting to make quietly some investments in our space. It's interesting how the landscape's changing and how there's opportunities to work with other investors because of how that change has happened.
Do you find yourselves each acting collectively more? I mean, look, there were certainly other people in your round, for example.
Yep.
Is that a hindrance, or is these sort of different ways to get it done a help?
I mean, for us, we have a certain check size, and sometimes that check size, isn't enough to take down the whole round. So I think for us, when we're looking at that, we're looking for complementary partners, and we're not just taking, we want to. I think you craft a boardroom or you craft an investor set with different skill sets, multifunctional. I mean, that's when you're going to win. So in that case, sometimes it's not all our choice, but if we have the choice or we have the opportunity to bring other trusted partners in, I think that's going to be, benefit to the founders and a benefit to the business. And where we sit, that's okay. Because we can lead or we can co-invest. I'm sure it's a little bit harder where you have to put your check in place and how you pick, kind of collaborate there.
Right.
So you guys don't syndicate out part of the round?
It's something, just a conversation I was just having in the room earlier about. We are actively looking at more of those kinds of opportunities where we probably haven't been partnering as much or collaborating as much with other funds. It's something that we feel like we need to do. Frankly, having more smart people around in the room and thinking about the investment, it can't hurt. And as long as we're aligned and both in terms of values and strategy and culture and all that, then why not? I don't see how that could be a bad thing, assuming there's enough room for all of us.
Last minute advice for our entrepreneurs here on the fundraising process.
I said this somewhere else, I might have got jeered, but I think you raise, the best time to raise capital is when you don't necessarily need it. What we see too much is people getting too tight. I think raising a little, I want to be very respectful for the dilution point for founders. We were there, we did it ourselves, we had to make those decisions. I think raising a little bit more capital than you need, it allows you to take those steps, take some risks, and present yourself in the right place. And that's not a self-serving message. I think the biggest thing we find, companies have problems is when they short they short a little bit of what they should raise and the time frame when they should raise it. And I think it's a dangerous proposition to do that.
And I think the key term that Larry used there was need. We can all sit around if we're working in an early stage food or consumer business and say, yeah, I could use $1 million, I could use $5 million. But really nailing and pinpointing what's the need. We can always talk about uses of proceeds. You've got to be able to detail out exactly what these dollars are being used for. There's so much capital flying around right now. Yes, you could raise $1 million or $5 million, but if you don't have a clear sense for what those dollars are going to be directed towards and what you're going to get out of it, and hopefully what kind of the rough ROI will be on that, I think it's probably not the best time to be taking capital.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. Thanks.